Once earliest Christianity had talked about, by whatever theology, the kingdom here or the resurrection begun, or any way they put it, inquiring minds wanted to know, when's it going to end and how is it going to end? You might think it would have been better and wiser to have focused on collaboration with God rather than inquiring minds wanting to know, how's it going to end? But almost immediately, maybe even on the lips of Jesus himself, the consummation of the kingdom became a question. And of course, there is no answer. Probably the wisest thing in the entire New Testament is Jesus' own comment that only the Father knows. That would be very, very good to have written across the conscience of Christianity for the last 2,000 years. Only the Father knows, which means you don't. So shut up about it. Okay. But I suppose it's inevitable. How is it going to end? When's it going to end? And I suppose it's all right to do it as long as that focus does not take the focus off the present collaboration with the kingdom. So how is it going to end? When's it going to end? Now, we have no models for this. They had no models for this. They had taught in the tradition that God's going to do all of this by God's own power, and we just kind of be ready for it. And then they find out that they have to collaborate. And then the next question is, how is it all going to end? So whenever something like this happens, you have to have models. The human mind cannot imagine without models. You can see this whenever we get into science fiction and we try to create beings from another world. They always look kind of like us, only weirder. You know, they'll have one eye here or something like that. We can't really create outside our own imagination. So what are they imagining? Now this is very important, because there's two opposite imaginations within the New Testament, two opposite mega metaphors, two opposite master models for how the consummation of the world is to take place. I'm not using the term return of Christ, by the way. I will not use return, because that means not here. Whenever somebody returns, they've been absent. And we've already been told in Matthew that Christ will be with us all days until the end. So I'm talking about the end. How are we imagining the end? And quite frankly, I suppose, to be truthful, I don't believe a word of it, but I'm just interested in the two different models, because we're back with something very fundamental. Is God violent? The two models. One model is in Paul of Tarsus. It's in 1 Thessalonians and in 1 Corinthians 15. The other model is in John of Patmos, in the last book of the Christian Bible, the book of the Apocalypse or the book of Revelation. Two very, very different models. Let me begin with Paul. Paul does expect, by the way, that the consummation of this whole process will be over in his own lifetime. No problem with that. He believes it'll be over in his own lifetime. He always talks about we. Now, he was wrong about that. He was wrong off by about 2,000 years and counting. It didn't happen in his own lifetime. But I'm interested again in how he imagines it, because that tells me about the models he has in his mind. Here's how it rose for Paul. He had been at Thessalonica, modern Thessaloniki. He had founded a church there, and then the church was persecuted. And he was driven out of Thessalonica, in fact, out of Macedonia, the Roman province of Macedonia, all the way down to the next province to the south, Achaia. He gets, as he tells us in 1 Thessalonians, to Athens, and he's so worried about his congregation back there and how they are doing, he sends Timothy back to find out. And by the time Timothy comes back with good news, he's at Corinth. So Paul is writing 1 Thessalonians from Corinth, and he's heard there's been persecution. Some of his people died as martyrs. And some of their loved ones are asking this question. Now, Paul, you told us that any day now, soon within our own lifetime, the consummation of the kingdom is going to happen. What about our loved ones who are in the tombs? They're buried. Won't they be at some kind of a loss? Won't they be, maybe they'll get forgotten. So they have a very human, familial, pastoral problem. Paul, what about the dead? What about our loved ones who are already dead? And Paul is dancing on his feet as fast as he goes and making it up. There's no answer to this. Nobody has asked this question before. And the easy answer would be, oh, it doesn't make any difference, they'll all rise at the same time. But it's a pastoral problem. They've died first. So don't tell us, Paul, everyone will be the same. So Paul comes out with a marvelous idea. He knows, for example, that during an imperial visitation, now, this is the world of the Pax Romana. The only imperial visitations he knows about are peaceful ones, when the emperor comes to visit your city. And it's a matter of great festivity. He's going to bring lots of donations. It'll cost you a little, of course, but everyone can celebrate. The ordinary people, there'll be feasts and everything else. So the imperial visitation is a marvelous thing. Probably nobody is still alive in the heart of the Roman Empire who've ever experienced invasion. So the advent of the emperor is good news. And then Paul thinks, and he invites his people to think, as the emperor is coming into your city, who will greet him first? The beloved dead. Who will line the roads, the great tombs? Everyone knows that. Every road leading into the Roman city has tombs on it. And the more important you are, the closer your tomb is to the road. So Paul tells them, when Christ comes, think of it as an imperial visitation. And he's coming. Who will greet him first, says Paul? Why, the beloved dead, the honored dead, the martyrs. So not only are your people who have died at no disadvantage, they're at an advantage. They'll get to greet Christ first. And then, of course, Christ will enter the city and we all celebrate. So, Paul's vision is not of Christ coming back to do it for us when we have failed, but to celebrate with us when we have succeeded. The emperor coming into the city, the official word is parousia, the word he uses in 1 Thessalonians. And the official greeting is called an apantesis, again, the official language he uses in 1 Thessalonians. When that happens, you greet the emperor to come into your city, not to go back. So when you meet Christ, as it were, at the consummation of the world, he comes into the world. Now, that's a metaphor, that's a model. But it's very consoling for his Thessalonian people whose loved ones have become martyrs. They'll be first to greet. They'll be the honored dead. But understand, Christ is never coming back for Paul to do it for us, but to celebrate what has already been succeeded. It's a totally peaceful model. It's a totally grand finale when we have accomplished with God the kingdom of God on earth. And then, says Paul, it's handed back to God. Christ does not come to do it for us, but to celebrate it, well done. It's a bit like a modern president going somewhere to sign, all the documents when everything has been done. Now turn from that to John of Patmos. And with John, we turn to a terribly different vision. In John of Patmos, Christ is not coming to celebrate with us a job well done, to celebrate peacefully with us a job well done. He's coming to substitute violently for what we have failed to do. He's coming with violence. And if you're saying to yourself, well, where can John of Patmos get a persuasive model for an imperial visitation which is violent? Nobody in his world has ever experienced that. They'll be living in the Pax Romana for a couple of generations. Where's his model? You notice in the book of Revelation, one of the emperors that gets an awful lot of attention is Nero. Nero. And a lot of scholars have wondered, why does Nero get so much attention? Nero is dead in the year 68, and John is probably writing around the 90s, maybe 30 years later. Why does Nero get all that attention? Why Nero? Because it often happens that when a ruler or some very popular character dies under sort of mysterious circumstances, with their great work unfinished, and where there's a lot of popular support for them. The claim has been made that this person didn't really die. They're hidden away somewhere and they'll come back at some day in the future. You think of King Arthur, the once and future king. So we always think of Nero, of course, as the villain. And many people in Rome would have agreed with us at the time. He's the one, after all, the great persecution after the great fire of 64, when he martyred so many Christians because he blamed them for it. He's the one who was accused of, probably rightly, of having murdered his mother Agrippina, the matricide. But in the East, there's a very different story about Nero. Not the West, but in the East. Nero had gone to Corinth, for example, had visited Corinth and partook in the great games there. He always won, of course. He played the lyre. He won festivals with the lyre. He actually raced in a chariot. The East loved him. He was sort of their emperor. He had Easternized himself. Now, the Roman elite thought this was unspeakable, of course, but the East loved him. So when Nero died, he was going to be assassinated probably, and he committed suicide himself, and there was no grave. Nobody knew what happened, really. So the rumor began in the East that he hadn't died at all. He'd gone east beyond the Parthian, beyond the Euphrates, and was going to come back with the Parthians to destroy Rome. Now, that's not a Rome belief, but that's an Eastern belief. The Roman Empire is going to be destroyed by Nero. Nero redivivus, as we say in Latin. Nero coming back to lead the Parthians and destroy Rome. Now, John's terrible vision, I say from a Christian point of view, John's ghastly vision is no. Nero is not the one coming back to destroy Rome. Christ is coming back to destroy Rome. He has substituted Christ for Nero. That's why Nero is so important in there. That's why Nero is the 666 number. That's why Nero rules the city on the 7 hills, Rome. So John's model is not the peaceful emperor coming to celebrate a job well done, but the violent emperor coming to punish you for not doing it. Now, these two visions could not be more opposed to one another. The peaceful, celebratory vision of Jesus in Paul, or the violent, punitive vision in John of Patmos. And it's sad beyond words that Nero has become the model for Christ. It's also sadder, of course, that in our generations, in the last 100 years, in the Narnia Chronicles of C.S. Lewis and in the Left Behind series, we've gone a step further, because nothing in the apocalypse says that Christians are going to assist Christ when he comes back with vengeance to destroy all those who have failed. But in these two series of novels, the Narnia Chronicles and the Left Behind series, Christians, even Christian children who are alive at the time Jesus returns, will participate with him in the slaughter of those who are evil. I cannot imagine a greater act of treason to the non-violent Jesus as the revelation of the non-violence of God than to say, in effect, well, okay, you came in the incarnation and you didn't get it right. Come back again and get it right. Forget that stuff about the donkey. Come back on a war horse. Come back on a white stallion. And forget that other turning the other cheek stuff. Come back with a sword. Come back and solve it by killing. These are the two visions. They're both metaphors and models of consummation. You could disbelieve them both. They could both be wrong. But the first one, the one in Paul, is a one that at least does not destroy the Christian imagination. Christ's consummation is a celebration with us of a job well done. Christ's consummation is the destruction of our failure. We have not done it. We have failed. I am with Paul, of course, and not with John.